Hey. Well, welcome to our last episode of season 10, Changing the Game. We're talking all about elevated branding and building a brand that speaks, spreads, and stands out. And if you missed any of the previous ones, we were just saying all of our episodes are on our YouTube channel for Playmaker Coach. You can view them there. We'll try to make sure that those links are available on social media too, so that you can find those and get to any of those to continue the conversation. And we'll be back this fall with another series of advisors showcasing some of their winning plays when it comes to marketing. I'm your host, Jennifer Hensley. If we haven't got a chance to meet, spent about 20 years both in the field and the home office at Northwestern Mutual. And now, for the last five, been working directly with advisors to help them play their position, stay in offense, and score more DL clients. So great to be with you today and to have Dipti Krishnan with us as our guest today. Dipti and I have known each other for many years, back to our days in the home office. So she's had a very interesting journey. And we're going to dive into our topic and want to just start it off, Dipti, if you want to introduce yourself a little bit more, tell us a little bit more about your practice, and then we'll get into our topic today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jan, for reaching out and, putting this together. Like you said, we go a long way. My journey started in the home office in 2005. I was a corporate employee for 12 years and then decided that I actually wanted to come out to the field and have a more impactful career. And that's when Jen and we worked on the Women's Employee Resource Group on a couple projects. And Jen reached out when she started her practice and kind of, again, as a woman entrepreneur, we both then partnered, which is also the reason why, we're having this discussion today. About my practice, I just started my eighth year as a financial advisor, primarily serving diverse families and, within that, even the Asian Indian community, because I hail from India. I moved to the United States in 2000 and now I obviously raised a family here, married with two kids. And my practice has been, and I found that, we've made the most impact, I would say, with, families and professionals who are in their mid 30s to 40s. As I look to the future and growing my practice, my focus is now also going to be able to serve the retiree market. So that's kind of where my focus is. I have one team member who I hired, and she primarily takes care of the insurance operations. And I leverage the larger investment firms within our network office for my investment practice. So I have an integrated practice. From day one, that was a big focus of mine was I didn't want to go to market, just being, when I say I want to actually make that impact, I want to be able to offer all aspects of the planning for my clients. And so I've had an integrated practice.
Yeah, I think you bring such a wealth of experience that you were able to see it from a different angle before you stepped into that career and everything, and now what you're doing and how you're impacting others. So, we're going to have our conversation for about 10 minutes. If you have some questions, you can jot those down or put them in the chat. We'll open up about the end of that time, give you opportunity to ask some additional questions of Dipti at that time. So, we want to start off with talking a little bit about building community and speaking engagements as one tool within that. So tell us a little bit more about how you've used that to really elevate your brand and what role that has had in your business.
Sure. So again, as I shared earlier, I was a corporate employee and, one of my hobbies is I'm a trained Indian classical dancer. As a result of that hobby and an interest for me to pursue that, I was also a member of a cultural association. So with that common connection, community connection, where, we do like group performances together, they knew me as a Northwestern Mutual employee. And then when I started it out, that was like a platform for me to also showcase. And they knew me and then tell them, hey, this is kind of a new thing I'm doing. So I did leverage that community connection I had, where the trust, we had obviously built that to some extent. And so it was one way that I did utilize to broadcast that and say, I'd love to do a seminar, just explain things because I've had this experience of being a home office employee, but I was a client as well. So I was very enthusiastic about sharing my story because it's a big decision when you think about being a career changer, right? So my goal was to say and communicate my story story. So that way it would resonate with them and they would engage with me. So that was one that came to mind. The other is I serve on the board of a shelter home. It's the Women's Center in Waukesha. I'm, based here in Wisconsin. And with the nonprofit work, again, I took that lens of educating and sharing like what are things people need to be aware of. And from that, it sparks another conversation and they're interested or they want to meet with me. So those are some of the ways I have leveraged my community connections.
Mm.
And I do go out and yeah, it's a goal almost, and I've shared this with Jen earlier, is I would ideally want to do at least one presentation every quarter. So I actively look at, community things that I can leverage. The other things I've done is I look for what events are happening because around like the big festivals, for instance, the Indian community comes together. We celebrate a lot, so I try to have a good presence in those events. Sometimes I'll like set up a booth there, just have some information, and then tell them I'm willing to host a learning like seminar, or they can always reach out to me for a one-on-one.
And I know part of the work we did together too was how can we showcase that on your digital presence? So we'll talk a little bit more about digital in a little bit, but I know that was something important to you since that's a key part of your strategy. But a couple things that you mentioned that really stood out to me too is you talked about story, and we always talk about that the power of the story and putting your message out there because nobody's going to care about it as much as you are, and everybody's going to receive it different at different points in their lives as well. And where you talked about getting involved in things that were meaningful to you, I think that really echoes our last session where Irina, which I know you know Irina McGrath too, she was talking about that too of, not just doing something because it's like, oh, everybody says go to this networking event, but find the things that really are the right fit for you because if you're excited about them, that's going to come through in what you're doing as well. So part of the work that you've been doing in this space and everything, and as you've been making that, you made that transition from the home office to owning your own business and who you want to work with, like you've talked about, is having that confidence and clarity around your story and how do you tell your story. So tell us a bit more about what that was like for you to, get, and I'm sure it's still evolving, like you said, with now leaning a little bit more towards the retirement market, but how you kind of went through that and starting to put your voice out there and showcase that through your digital presence.
The exercise again, when it was about sitting down and really honing in on what made me make that switch, right? And what stood out at that point was the fact that as a client of Northwestern Mutuals, one of the things I was so proud of was my own plan that I was able to make this big switch. And so that became one of the main things I was communicating to anyone I would meet is I was able to take that decision because of a sound plan that was already in place, and my spouse and I, we knew where we were headed. So I was utilizing that story a lot to communicate that, and then through the website and social media, that has always been, hey, I immigrated to the United States, and these are the things I've done, and now I'm a successful business owner. So I did leverage the fact that I was able to make such a big life-changing decision and start the business because I had a financial advisor and a sound plan. So I made sure I told that story to everyone. And it is my goal that whoever I come across, they learn something and that they will, that experience, it's very important for me, has to be positive because they'll remember how I made them feel. And so that's kind of how I've gone about doing this. And then with the whole exercise Jen and I did with revamping my website, she helped me, like she asked very pointed questions on how do we say this, in a more clear, concise, and refined manner. So that exercise with her also helped solidify my story.
Mhm. There's so many things in there. A couple things I'd love for you to touch on a little bit more is, or you talked about how you want people to feel and how that was part of your message is like, hey, if I was in their shoe and I was reading this, Do I want them to feel like this is somebody who's very buttoned up and professional, or this is somebody who feels like I could share anything or I can relate to? And that number one goal of your digital presence always being, hey, you want to connect. And you've done that beautifully. Like you talked about, of sharing your own story of like, hey, this was my experience that people maybe can relate to or they're aspiring to be able to make those jumps in their own life. So tell a little bit more about as you were going through it, like how difficult was that for you? Because especially sometimes early on, I hear advisors like, I don't know what that is, or gosh, that sounds kind of daunting of where do I even start with that? So what was your experience, of like leaning into that and that process and how what your experience was kind of navigating that?
With respect to communicating the story or the digital presence?
Yeah, about, discovering and kind of figuring out like what is your message that you want to communicate?
A big passion area, right? And I have, two of the younger female advisors here with us today. So I really it was about making sure that women were thinking about finances. And it was bringing, the immigrant diverse families, a lot of times, the male members are the ones taking care of the finances. And so my messaging was, hey, look at what we've done with, my own family. I've made this career change. I'm the first Asian woman advisor. So it was a little scary, but from the fact that I left everything and everyone I knew and immigrated here 25 years ago, getting out of my comfort zone was always something I was getting more comfortable doing. So it was just that and I may be repeating what most folks already know, but the growth happens when you get out of your comfort zone. And so I had my doubts, but I didn't let that stop me from actually still reaching out and talking to folks I knew and just say, hey, I want to do this. What do you think about it? So that's kind of how I went about it.
Yeah. So it seemed like when we first engaged, you had this message. You kind of knew what you wanted to say. And some people are like that, but some people also are like, "Hey, I don't even know what's different about my practice or at this stage who I want to work with and everything." So whether you're at any of those stages, some of those questions like Dipti talked about can be really helpful in terms of bringing that out because everybody, I believe every advisor has a story that's really powerful and can really connect with people. So one of the things we want to make sure that we do in this time is always talk about some practical tips of, how have you really gotten to this point and utilized marketing? So what's one thing, if especially you've got some of those newer advisors that are with us today that you recommend, if they want to take some of your, emulate some of the things you've had success with in your practice and get started with that in the next couple weeks, where would you advise that they start?
It's spring is around the corner, right? Like it's such a and for those of us here in Wisconsin and in the Midwest in general, I feel a lot of fairs will be coming up now, and be tuned with your local community to see what are the events that are happening, and are there like affinity groups, perhaps, right? Iman, like we've talked about your engagement with the South 16th Street as an example, so we're looking for some common connections where then we can reach out to the organizers and say, we'd love to do an event, kind of like a learning webinar, or could I just come and set up a booth and then talk to people because sometimes they'll stop by. But as weather gets warmer, people are more happier, they're out a lot more. So I'm also looking right now at, what's the next event. I'm closely associated with the Hindu temple in Wisconsin, and so I always get their calendar ahead, look at what events there are, and where can I have a presence with my team so that they start to think about, oh, Dipti, yes, this is what she does, like put the name, face together. So I proactively look for events where I can have a presence and make that impact.
Mm. That's great advice and everything of looking ahead. We always talk about, what are those kind of real time things, those things where it's like, hey, if you miss it, like it's old news. Nobody's going to care anymore. So whether it's something where it's like Summerfest in Milwaukee and like everybody's talking about it at that time of year, or right now it's NFL draft in Milwaukee in Wisconsin here coming up and everything. Or for your clients, it might be who's getting bonuses at certain times of the year or kids that are going out to college. What are those things where there's kind of some seasonality to it where you can really make an impact if you show up in that space or in that topic that's trending? Like right right now too on social media, right? Everybody, have you guys done your action figure? Like everybody's jumping on the action figure, right? It's like the buzz at the moment. So where can you be present in that? So we want to open it up to questions. So you can unmute and just ask your question, or if you have it, you can put it in the chat too, and we'll start from there.
I do have a question. And so Dipti, I know you and I have talked a lot, and you had mentioned even like with like other organizations that like I've dealt with. And so sometimes I struggle, I think, with successfully presenting myself in this new atmosphere, right? And like convincing people to come in and meet. And I have like an amazing team, and I obviously, talk about them all the time and how they have so much experience, and we're here to empower other women and, just all of it. And so I think just kind of getting a little bit more feedback in terms of how to do that more successfully, any suggestions that you may have that have worked for you, especially as you did change careers, like kind of towards that beginning.
Great question. And I'm glad you brought that up because one thing I didn't mention in the beginning was joint work. Because that this was such a good way for, I was thinking like, okay, I should also share that with the attendees today is I leveraged a lot of joint work the first 2 years in my practice. As a matter of fact, Sherry Mitchell, she was my advisor, and both her and we would actually go together and do presentations. So if you are in that space, reach out because we have a fantastic group of female advisors in our office, and so you can definitely utilize our expertise and experience too. And the other thing I've learned with doing speaking engagements and doing having that community presence is also we need to be patient. It's almost delayed gratification in some cases. So it's like your own garden, right? You got to sow the seeds in spring and water and fertilize it, and then it's almost summer by the time you see, the fruits or the tomatoes come out. So that's what I have learned is some organizations, I have spoken to them like last year, and right now is when they're starting to even talk to me about when would be a good time. So, it doesn't matter. You're, in the initial years of your practice, I'm over 5, but we're kind of still face that. And so for me, it's always about being patient, and then the messaging for me has always been I'm going to be a resource for them, and I don't show that with thing that I'm not so tied to the outcome because I don't ever want in our market, because you serve a niche community as well, that they should feel and come to us as resources they can reach out to at any point in time. So that's the hard, balance here, right? Like we want to have that meeting, we want them to take action, but a lot of times it's delayed gratification. And over the years, what I have really invested in is the relationship. And so I'll get this feedback too sometimes, they'll be like, you could push them a little, but I'm like, no, that's not natural for me. I would, my advisor never did that. So that's the thing I've learned is as you talk to these groups, it may not be immediately that, they have the opportunity for you to do a presentation or but keep in touch with them, which is kind of what I do. And be patient because at the end of it, they'll start to see where you are committed to helping, and then they will give you that opportunity to showcase your talent.
Now you got to come in and provide value, which it sounds like you've done, and you've seen the long-term picture of like, hey, if I stick with this, where this will pay off. And now it sounds like you've got enough of this flywheel of like, hey, I'm always having some new things coming up that it's okay that things take longer because you have enough in your system that you're like, hey, I know that one's going to take a while, but I have this other one that I did last year that's starting to come to fruition. So just like Graham in that 10-3-1, you had to have enough of that activity in the same way with your other strategies to really see that payoff. One thing I'll mention too, to piggyback on what you were talking about is, highlighting your transferable skills or the lessons you've learned in your previous work that you can bring to what you're doing now. Whether you're doing that directly in some of your messaging, or also through testimonials. You could have other people that have worked with you that could talk about your values, how much you're a sharp learner, how much, you go to bat for people. They can do some of that for you as well to help kind of bridge that gap between what you were doing before and what you're doing now. So, one other thing I'd love to have you, Dipti, to talk a little bit further about too, when you're talking about a community involvement and looking at it, where, what are you using? Can you go a little bit more in depth on like how far in advance you're looking for things and where do you find these? Because I think some advisors are like, well, I don't really know where to look or how to find the right people or the right organizations or things I can get involved with. So what's worked best for you?
So that was a homework, as a new advisors on board, one of the homeworks they have us do is identify almost like what are our centers of influence, right? So I am a student of the business. So I kind of did that homework ahead even before I started the practice. So I knew, like I said, I'm closely associated with the Hindu Temple of Wisconsin. So one of the bubbles, even if you remember the picture, like they make us fill out who those centers of influence are. So I started writing down who are the folks I could reach out to as I make that switch from corporate to starting the business, sharing this is what I'm going to be doing and requesting their support, right? The people closest to us, our friends, they probably won't become clients because that's a different personal relationship. But they will be good folks to give you referrals and to mention your name in a room when you're not there. So that's kind of what I focused on. To answer Jen's question, so with the Hindu temple, the calendar is usually out in fall for the next year. Similarly, with the cultural organization that I was a member of, and I still am, it's like an investment for us, right? We nurture those relationships, but I also sponsor. So I set aside a certain amount of dollars every year, and then there are organizations where I'm really starting to see over the years, I'm onboarding new clients from them. And that's because of the community now, almost partnership, right? I am the financial advisor. It's almost that's who they will refer in case someone asks them, who do you use or could you suggest somebody? So so my planning for the following years really starts in fall. I start to gather the calendar of activities and look at which ones I want to have a solid presence, reach out to the organizers ahead of time and say, I will be the sponsor for this event. And that I request then, they don't obviously have someone else competing for what I offer. So early on, if you do that and they don't then have to scramble for some sponsorship funds either, I've felt that that's helped me.
Yeah, you went to them before they're like just trying to be like, what can we do and stuff. So
Yeah.
I've heard you kind of talk about like going deep with organizations too, versus you don't have to have, 20 different relationships. Find some ones that you can really become more of that partner with them. Doing your research, which we're in the day and age too, where you have access to AI tools and things that can help do maybe some of that research for you to find out, hey, when do they have an events or when does their information come out? When do I need to be relevant to them because that's when they're going to be starting to plan these things or look for people to plug into them, and that you purposefully set aside some dollars for your marketing efforts. So just like you would probably tell your clients to have that retirement fund or to have that vacation fund so they can go on those fabulous trips and everything, that you're doing that for your marketing and your business too, to say, I'm going to set aside some specific dollars to be able to put that into the business and growing that. So I think those are all great pieces that you shared in terms of how do you actually tangibly make some of this come to life. We have time for one more question. If do you want to ask another additional question before we wrap up today? Good opportunity.
Oh, I'm feeling pretty good.
Okay.
This is all awesome. Been taking rigorous notes, so thank
Great.
you.
Well, if other things come to mind, you can continue the conversation. I know you know where to reach out to Dipti and everything. I always welcome a conversation too. Love to get to know new advisors and everything. And remember the try it at work tip that Dipti talked about, look at what's happening, at least the next 3 to 6 months, go out there, do a little research and figure out, what's something where there's an opportunity that you could connect and plug into something that's meaningful to your audience that you're focusing on right now. Um, with the season wrapping up, one of the things we always do for our speakers is we want to do a charitable give back to an organization that Dipti's passionate about. What's an organization that we can support, Dipti?
The Women's Center of Waukesha. I serve on the board, and again, I'm their voice. So yes, if you could support them in any way, we welcome that.
Yeah, happy to do so. That sounds like a great cause. Love to, especially, as a female myself too. We go back to that, like you said at the beginning, be able to support other women organizations and everything. So whether you're looking for an idea or two, hopefully you walked away with something from today. But if you want to keep that momentum going forward as well, you can request a personalized digital marketing checkup on our website. We know it's kind of the storefront, the first place people go. And if you're curious about how you might be able to elevate your own branding and start that journey, that's a great tool to get started. You can just go to playmakercoach.com/checkup, and we'll be happy to send you a customized report on your digital presence. We'll send out the recording as well afterwards, and all those links to the additional seasons before that are on our YouTube channel. And then we're excited to be back this fall. We'll be working on our lineup and be sharing that out. If you don't get our newsletter, that's a great way to stay up to date on all those future webinars and events that are coming out and everything, to make sure that you don't miss those when those new ones are available. Thank you again, Dipti, for your time and expertise today, and great to meet you, and look forward to you guys having a wonderful summer as we start to turn the corner here.
Thank you, John. This was fun. Happy Easter. Enjoy your
Happy
trip.
Easter. Thanks.
Bye.
Have a great rest of your day.